Hey guys, welcome to Review of the Week. It's your host James, and I'm on my own for this episode today, mainly because I can't find anyone else to do it. But that's not a problem because we haven't had a solo episode in a while, and on that same vein, we haven't had an episode in a while, unfortunately. And I'm afraid I've just had a load of family stuff going on, loads of work, school work and stuff like that, so I haven't been physically got the time to do anything podcast related. But we're back on track. It's the holidays, so we're definitely going to be going back to one episode per week from now on. But anyway, let's jump right into it. A lot has happened over the last 3 weeks. I think we've been away, maybe 4. Obviously Stephen Hawking's died. There's been the chemical attack in London, but we're not going to talk about most of that because we all know a lot about it already. I want to start off with something that came in 28 minutes ago on the BBC. Now, just a point about the BBC, they are biased, like they are the most biased news organisation you could find. Way worse than Breitbart and InfoWars, whatever your opinion on them is. The BBC is way worse. But they do have some okay factual information, even though the rest of the articles and the news and all their stuff's trash. But essentially, the Russians have said there's no evidence of a Duma chemical attack in Syria. And this is coming in from a report, mainly from the Telegraph. I think that was the first one that said that there's been the Syrian government have used chemical weapons against their own people yet again, and this is the worst one yet. Now, here's the thing. Theresa May has been, quote, deeply disturbed by suspected Syrian chemical weapons attack. And that's according to the Telegraph. So the BBC and the Telegraph are saying the same thing, and essentially everyone's appalled by this chemical attack. Here's the thing, right? So the main problem we have here is that, obviously, the Syrian government are fighting against the jihadis, and they were about to have a massive victory in Duma, which is a city they've been fighting in, and then they go and use chemical weapons just when the US plans to do more bombing on the area. So what doesn't make sense to me and any logical thinking person, therefore, is that why would the Syrians go and institute a US bombing when they're literally about to have a victory in one of the main cities that they wanted to capture? It makes no sense. So I'm not saying it's not true. Obviously, there's a side to each argument. I'm trying to look at both sides here and be as objective as possible. But you have to wonder, how are we supposed to know what's going on when the BBC are saying one thing, which is probably trash, InfoWars and everyone else is saying another thing, which seems more likely, and Theresa May seems to be our Prime Minister, for those who obviously don't know, is siding on the side just based on poor evidence. So InfoWars has been running a poll, and they've been wondering whether Trump is going to put out of Syria or carry on or remove political incentive and things like that. And most people think that he's not going to pull out immediately, but he will pull out soon, because he tweeted back in 2013 saying that everyone needs to pull out of Syria because it's making more problems than it's solving. So he's gone against his own advice in 2013, which, I suppose situations change and things, and he's now the president. But it makes you think, what's going through his head. So not much to say on this story apart from what I've just said. Did it happen? Probably. The BBC reporting on it in the right way? No. Right, moving on. The BBC has been showing a lot of bias recently, so I definitely just want to make that point clear. It's a bit of a mess. So Nigel Farage has said that Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has buried his head in the sand. There's been a lot of stuff going on in London recently. Murders, 6 teenagers were stabbed in knife attacks, all this sort of thing. What's his face? Sadiq Khan hasn't turned up to any of these crime scenes or spoken to families or anything like that, so he's just as useless. Why is he useless? Let's think about it. Yeah, he's Labour, so you can't expect much more from those fools. So the crime in London spiked. Home Secretary and people are saying there's plenty of police and stuff like that. I'm not sure about that. I don't live in London, so I can't comment. I can comment, but it probably won't be as informed as someone who lives there. But I have been to London quite a lot recently because I live relatively close to London. But the point is that Sadiq Khan's useless and he just has to go. The man's a fool. and there's a massive crime spike in London. So that's what I wanted to get across there. Now, moving on to the second part of this episode, we've just covered recent news and local news pretty much, is the idea of anarcho-primitivism. Now, for those of you who have listened to the previous episodes, I think there's 10 of them now or something like that, you can pretty much gauge that I'm quite conservative. Alistair, who was a regular guest, is quite liberal. Ben, who we had on once, is again conservative. And I would have described myself in recent years as conservative. The only thing is, recently I've started to see changes, and actually I've seen the opposite. I haven't seen any changes between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Obviously they're both quite different, but in the grand scheme of things they're essentially the same. Each party just wants control, which is great because they both want to do their best from their point of view. So you can't push either of them for it. I would vote Conservative, but the point is that the government in the UK simply doesn't work. So for me, when I think about that in my head, you've got two choices. You can either vote for Conservative or Labour, or or UKIP or Lib Dems or whoever, or you could get rid of the government. So I have been looking around internet articles, books and things like that, and I found this idea of anarcho-primitivism. What is anarcho-primitivism? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory from the name: anarchy in a primitivist society, if that counts as a society at all. So anarchism is obviously no government, no law, no oppression, which is what I stand for and most libertarians would stand for. And primitivism is, according to Wikipedia, the shift from hunter-gatherer to agricultural sustenance has given rise to social stratification, coercion, and alienation and overpopulation. And I tend to agree with pretty much all of it. Anarcho-primitivism seems to be the only way forward. So, how do we implement it? Well, first of all, we have to get rid of the government. Then we have to get rid of all technology, and go back to living in the woods. It's as simple as that. And if that doesn't sound like a good idea, then I don't know what you must be thinking about. Because recently, me and Alistair and a few other friends who are also politically inclined went out into the woods. There was 5 of us. We took some food, we took some wood, dry wood because it rained the previous day, a hatchet, and we essentially made a shelter, we made a fire, we made food, and we lived out in the woods for a couple of days. And it sounds silly, but when you do it, it makes sense, and you feel a sort of primitivism inside you when you're chopping up a tree, or you're making a fire, or you're cooking, whatever it is over an open flame. There's something primitive, and also quite invigorating about it. And for me, from where I'm sitting, obviously, I've got quite a different point of view from most other people in the country and around the world for that matter. But as far as I'm concerned, technology's done nothing but bad things. We've seen the rise of AI recently, technology, people like Facebook, companies like that, Twitter. It's just, you can go on Facebook and have a look around for 30 seconds and you just want to die. Like, the amount of just, degenerate stuff on Facebook now, with all the SJWs and things complaining about gender pay gaps and, SJWs not being accepted into society and stuff. It's BS. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of all types of technology and people who communicate on them. So, it seems pretty obvious to me. Just get rid of all of them. It's as simple as that. So, it's been a short episode today, and I definitely just wanted to be the bulk of it centred around anarcho-primitivism, because it's a really important idea, and I think that a lot of people deep down really do want something like that. Obviously, everyone's not going to be an anarchist, and not everyone's going to be right-wing, but at the end of the day, it's the only real way forward. So, if you have any questions about it, or you want to learn more about it, send me an email at reviewoftheweekpodcast@gmail.com. Obviously, you can go on the internet and find all this stuff yourself. As usual, I'm going to leave all this stuff in the description for you to find. But there's a little bit more I want to talk about. So, if we go back to InfoWars, as I discussed earlier, we're seeing one last story that just popped up on my screen actually, which I wanted to talk about, is essentially it's a rise of, obviously, we've spoken about Germany before, and I'm no expert. I do German as a subject at school to a high level, and I like the culture. The people there, the food, the language. It just, to me, it's a great country. But unfortunately, this is a Belgium newspaper reporting this, HLN. So this isn't Infowars. There's a Islamic party there in Germany who are running in local elections. Sorry, no, not in Germany, in Belgium. In Belgium's municipal elections. That's why it's a Belgian newspaper. And the quote is, I don't speak Belgian, so I'm going to have to take this for face value from HLN. Our goal is 100% Islamic State. By establishing Sharia law courts, we want to follow the way of the Prophet and the Quran. So let's just think about that for a minute. We've got a migrant crisis, which as it actually isn't full of migrants, it's full of crazy people who have decided to come to Europe. And they've set up ghettos within countries. Just look at Calais, look at parts of Germany, Belgium, Sweden in particular. They've been absolutely destroyed by this migrant crisis, as they like to call it. And yeah, so they've set up ghettos, which we can't blame them for, because integration is obviously an integral part into bringing people into any society, which I support. But they're setting up political parties based on religion. How can you have a political party which is religious instead of ideological? If for example a Jew came up with a Jewish political party, all we'd get in this country from the BBC is they're racist, you can't have a religious political party and all this trash. If I want to set up a Christian political party, it's absurd, it's obscene. The major parties in the UK and the US, there's different types of people in all of them. A party has to be based on people with the same ideas, right? And if they happen to share a religion, fine, that's great. If they happen to share a race or a history, or they come from the same country or area of the world, that's fine, that's brilliant. But I can assure you there are people who aren't Muslim who might have the same ideas as these guys, and there might be people who are Christian and have similar ideas, because there's overlaps between all religions without exception. So I'm not just complaining about Islam here. The same has happened in history with Judaism and Christianity, but the most recent example here, the Islam one, setting up a political party based on religion is simply a bad idea, and I condemn this 100%, and I implore you to do the same. Really, it's disgusting. Oppressing people based on their religion sounds like Nazism to me, but then again, there's very little difference. So, thanks everyone for listening to this episode. If you want to learn more about anything, drop me an email. I'm going to leave the links in the description, of course. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.